Hello guys, and welcome back to a new series on my channel, which is where I am going to be talking about the sinking of some famous-ish vessels from the 20th and maybe even 18th century, and one or two from the century we're in now, the 2000s. So without further ado, let's get into our first sinking. So our first sinking is going to be an obvious one. There is one ship that nearly everyone knows about, and that is, of course, the Titanic. The Titanic was the biggest ocean liner of its time and belonged to the White Star Line. One of the things I am going to say before we start this video that will, it is, not many people know it, but the White Star Line never proclaimed that the Titanic was unsinkable. What they did say, just tell me if I'm wrong in any of the wording or anything, but what they said is, she is as sinkable as we can make her. Now, at that time, as sinkable as we can make her, anyway, it would make people want to go on her by saying she is as unsinkable as we can make her. Now, that wasn't the White Star Line's intention. What they were trying to say is she is the safest, we've made her as safe as she can possibly be. And by that, I mean, they have put in so many precautions onto the vessel that it seemed that they were really doubtful of a disaster, although they were still wary of it. A really big design flaw that would end up making a loss of life, a great loss of life on the Titanic, is the fact that it only had 20 lifeboats. It was supposed to have a couple more, I think, but then they took it out for luxury and comfort or something like that. But really, they shouldn't have taken it out. I mean, of course, they did say that she was as unsinkable as we could make her, but not nearly as unsinkable as her sister ship, the Britannic. She was just as sinkable as they could make her, and they were so doubtful of a fateful event occurring that they just said, you know what, screw the extra lifeboats, we're going to go for it. Now, obviously, if you just said that she was as sinkable as if I was the owner of the White Star Line and I just published an article saying she's as unsinkable as we can make her, I would try to show that. Either I wouldn't have lifeboats strung all across the deck, or I would have some stored away in an easily accessible place. For example, one of the small little things on the top of the boat. So yeah, it was kind of a stupid decision to only have 20 lifeboats, but I'm not going to criticize that, because obviously, like I just said, you don't want them to think that you're doubting the ship, do you? Anyway, time to get on to the actual sinking. On the Sunday that she left Southampton, there was a lifeboat drill. This lifeboat drill basically launched one of the lifeboats, and made sure that they were working properly. The crew knew how to launch them in case of emergency, and the passengers on board knew what to do if they were going to do it. And so on the Sunday morning that they left, on the Saturday, Saturday the 14th of April, I have to double check if it's Saturday. On that day, they were supposed to have another lifeboat drill. And the reason they didn't is because it was a Sunday morning, wasn't it, that they didn't do it? Yeah, it was a Sunday morning. I'm not sure what day it was just a Sunday morning. And they were going to do a lifeboat drill, but they decided they didn't want to because obviously there were loads of church services happening, all that kind of thing. So they didn't want to disturb that, which is it's a totally valid reason. But still, they should have had one at some point during the day, which they didn't. So on the 14th of April, the ship was just slowly cruising along through the Atlantic Ocean. Like, it was just, everyone on board was having a great time. They weren't worried about anything. They were just like almost having a party, just sort of like vibing around, just because they were on the biggest ship of the world on its maiden voyage. If you didn't know, maiden voyage is the first voyage of a ship with passengers. Obviously, there were test voyages with the crew, the appointed crew, but this was the first voyage with passengers. So on that day, that was the day that the Titanic struck the iceberg, as most people know. There are hundreds of videos proclaiming why the iceberg was there in April. And I found a video a couple of days ago saying the iceberg was there because the wind, or something like that. And I'm just like, heavy breathing, just sort of like, the iceberg wasn't there because of the wind. It was there because it's something that's very easy to look up. It's a current. It's called the Labrador Current, and I'm just like seriously, who would think that wind pushed it down from the Arctic? Seriously. But rant over, the iceberg was there because of the current. Now, it was really late, and it was really late when it struck the iceberg, almost midnight. And there was no moon. It was a new moon. There was no moon in the sky. It was just the stars. It wasn't foggy at all. But that's when it hit the iceberg. And now, most people believe that binoculars could have helped the crew see the iceberg beforehand. That is not true at all. If they had binoculars don't suddenly just magic up lots of light, do they? So they couldn't have spotted it because it must have been completely black, with some visibility. But even if they did have binoculars, then they wouldn't have been able to see the iceberg. And now you may be thinking right now, hold on, why didn't they have binoculars? Of course, every ship at that time should have had binoculars. And now the true thing about the Titanic is that there were lifeboats. I'm getting so confused today. I've just woken up. I am sorry. But there were binoculars on board the ship. But just before the maiden voyage, there was a crew shuffle. There was a crew shuffle thing. And so that was basically where the ship's crew just sort of changed a bit. And so this man left the ship in quite a hurry because he was supposed to be replaced by another person. But instead, what happened is he took the keys to the binocular cabinet. And so there was no way of opening that cabinet without force opening it, which they didn't want to do under any circumstances. And then the Titanic hit the iceberg. I'm going to bring another ship into this, which I'll do a full video on later. And this will also explain why this wasn't the worst, opening in the side of the ship there ever has been. I'm going to bring in the Costa Concordia. Now, this is a model of a Celia Line ferry called the Celia Symphony. It might be a cruise ship, I don't know. But just pretend it's the Costa Concordia, because I haven't found any models of the Costa Concordia yet. If I do, I will use them, okay? So now, what happened aboard this ship is it was close to stern, but only damaged about 300. It damaged about 300 feet, which isn't that long when you think about a massive cruise ship like this. So it was along here, but it was one massive gash. Like water's being let in at massive speeds, at top speeds. But with the Titanic, although it was around from here all the way to here, about 1,400 feet, it was almost Morse code markings along the ship, because it was just like little gashes along the ship that didn't really do anything. Now here's where my memory goes wrong. After the holes were punctured in the side of the ship, I believe that only 4 watertight compartments could be flooded before the ship sank. And I do think that is true. It might be something more, it might be something less. Like I say, I am really confused. That's not really my area of expertise on the Titanic, and I'm going to tell you something that will, confuse you, but the ship I know most about is not the Titanic. Okay, so, yeah. So, basically, after those 4 watertight compartments were full, it would just start slowly lowering the ship into the water until it was just gone. Like, that was how the watertight compartments worked. If 1 was full, it would be fine. If 2, 3, or more, depending on how many watertight compartments could be full, it's something around 4, but if 4 is right, then 3 or less compartments would not flood the ship, would not sink the ship, unless not definitely sink the ship, but 4 definitely would, I think. So because those 4 watertight compartments were full, the ship slowly started leaning further and further into the water. So it's just good. And the sinking took an incredibly long amount of time because of the amount of water that was getting into the ship. Because of the markings that the iceberg made along the boat, only small amounts of water were being let into the ship at all time. And like normal ships, e.g. the Lusitania, the first bits of the sinking were very, very, very slow. Like, they wouldn't be as fat. They wouldn't just go it wouldn't just sort of go like this. It would have to fill up every room to properly sink, or most rooms. And now, because this, the ship was the biggest of its time, it had so many rooms to get through before the ship properly sank. I'm not even sure if that's right, but anyway, had lots of rooms to get through, which is why the sinking took so long. I believe it took 2 hours and 30 minutes or something like that. But yeah, now this is a really good thing about the Titanic during the time of its sinking. The captain, unlike the captain on the Costa Concordia, who I'll talk about later, unlike the captain of the Costa Concordia, the Titanic's captain did not leave the ship, until everyone was off safely. And of course, not everyone was off safely, so Captain Smith did go down with the ship. But that's what a captain should have done. That's what he was supposed to do, and that's what he did do, which is a really, really good thing. So, while the ship was sinking, and you guys will probably know this from the Titanic movies, no, it's not Jack and Rose. Jack and Rose did not exist at IRL. But the Titanic's band did keep playing until near the end. And then somebody Hardy's violin was found not in the wreckage. So he jumped off the side of the ship and he eventually died of hypothermia. And then his violin case was attached by a string to his life jacket. He did, well, I think it was Walter Hardy, but Walter Hardy died of hypothermia, and his body obviously sunk to the seafloor, and they found that, and they found the violin with it as well, which is a really cool thing. So the violin wasn't in the wreckage of the Titanic on the seafloor. It was just like sitting there. It was just like it was just on the bottom of the ocean somewhere. I'm not entirely sure how far away from the wreck it was, but it was somewhere around the wreck. Now is where we get into the sinking a bit more. As the Titanic slowly sunk under the water, it developed the tiniest list to starboard you could imagine. Like a normal ship would look like this. If it was like right up sinking like that, it would almost do this. But with the Titanic, it had the teeniest list to starboard. Of course, this doesn't look like starboard. I'll show you the stern line. It had the teeniest list to starboard, and then went down, which is why. But it was like the tiniest list, so it was barely recognizable, which is why the ship is right way up in the wreckage and not laying down on its side like most ships. So what happened while the ship was sinking is the first funnel after the bridge had gone underwater did actually collapse, and no one actually knows where the funnels went after the sinking. All of them just collapsed into the sea. Now, here's where a bit of trickery came in. If the Titanic had 3 funnels, would it make it look more or less powerful? Probably less powerful. So they added a 4th fake one. The 4th one, unlike the one on the Lusitania, didn't actually work. Like, it didn't produce any smoke. It was only the first 3 that actually worked. Now, as these went underwater, they just collapsed. As soon as it hit the water, they just, imagine my hand was the funnel, they just sort of went like that. I actually have a model of the Titanic, which I'm going to get down, and it has collapsible funnels. It is massive, but I'm going to show you what it is. Here it is. It's on the top of my bookshelf, but like you can actually push the funnels down on the boat. So these first 3 funnels, those are the working ones here. But this one was just a fake one. But it still collapsed, even though it was fake. Anyway, back to the sinking. So after the first funnel had collapsed, that penultimate crushed and left a huge dent in the ship. And if the captain was still in there and he was like still alive, if the bridge had doors, which I'm pretty sure it didn't, if it did and they were watertight, and Captain Smith closed them, he would have been killed anyway because of the first funnel collapsing onto the bridge. Now, here's something most people get wrong. The ship didn't do this. It wasn't like sticking up in the air like this, as most people believe. It went down almost like this. And then not much happened until the second funnel fell down. And until the third funnel even fell down. After the third funnel had fallen down, the ship broke in two about here. And so the bow, which was already full of water, suddenly went to the sea floor, hit the sea floor, and then just rested like this at the bottom. Now, obviously, this bit at the back, the stern, wasn't there. The stern at this point started filling up with water, and then a couple of minutes into sinking, it did just suddenly go like this. At one point, it was vertical, and that's when it began its final plunge. A final plunge of a ship is basically, I'm going to use a different model to show you, just so you can get the feeling. E.g. the Lusitania. So what happened is it reaches an almost vertical point and then just goes down really quickly into the sea. Now with the Lusitania, it didn't. It wasn't vertical. But with the Titanic, it was. And it just went down. And because of the way physics work, I think the back of the stern wasn't properly full with water yet. And it just, like the Titan submersible, it just completely, imploded on itself. Which is why the stern of the Titanic is in such bad condition today. And now, here is another fact before we end off the video. The ship didn't break into just two pieces. During the implosion of the stern, it broke again, which is why it's in three pieces at the bottom of the sea. A really flattened out, proper, aft bit of the stern. This bit, which is alright. And then this whole front section, which is okay. And also, the masts did fall over. The masts weren't there during the sinking. And for my brief explanation of the Titanic, I guess that's it for today's video. I will be doing more information when I've done a couple of other ship sinkings in the future. And when I've done a bit more research on the Titanic. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye!